Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Baker. I am one of the librarians here at Athens State University. This is the Annotated Bibliography Workshop. Awesome, you can hear me. And I'm here with Dr. Joy Bracewell. She is the Writing Center Director, and she will be moderating. So if you have any questions, Megan, since you're the only one in the room right now, feel free to ask them. Do you want to say anything, Joy?
Hi, Megan. I'm here to help facilitate with any questions that you may have. But Ms. Baker is the primary presenter today, so we'll look forward to hearing about what she says about annotated bibliographies.
Okay, so first we're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. And you said you can hear me now, so that's the first step. Just making sure that you can hear me when I'm talking on the upper left-hand side of your screen. You should see right underneath the picture of Dr. Bracewell and I a little toggle bar that jumps every time I say anything, and that means that I'm talking. And you should also be able to see me. Can you see us, or can you just hear us? Wonderful. Awesome. Oopsie. So as far as how I plan on interacting with you, I plan on just speaking with you. I don't really plan on using any of the whiteboard capabilities. As far as the chat panel, I'm going to try and keep my eye on both the presentation and the chat towards the bottom of the screen, but Dr. Bracewell is definitely keeping her eye on the chat. So if you have any questions, like I said, you can either raise your hand electronically, and the little hand icon is how you raise your hand, or you can type a comment or a question in the chat. We won't be able to hear anything that you say, but if you type it or you raise your hand, then I'll know that I need to stop or re-explain something or explain it in a different way, and we can go ahead and get started. I keep wanting to use the arrow symbols. So this is an annotated bibliography workshop, and the first part of that is the bibliography. So do you know what a bibliography is, Megan? Yeah, awesome. Well, what is it? Right. So the bibliography portion of an annotated bibliography is basically the citation. We have the four main ones, APA, MLA, Chicago, and Turabian. There are more than that, but those are the most popular, and those are the ones that are usually in either a works cited or a reference with APA or MLA. So that's one part of the annotated bibliography. The second part is the annotation. So do you know what an annotation is? No. Okay. So the annotation of an annotated bibliography is basically like a description. It's usually a paragraph or two for each section, and I'll go over what the sections are a little bit later, but it's just a short summary, a short evaluation, a short purpose on whatever the resource is. So the resource could be a book, it could be an article, it could be a tweet, it could be a Facebook post, a blog entry. The resource can be just about anything, popular or not. The annotation just describes it in different ways. Does that make sense? Awesome. Perfect. So the first thing that I really stress with my students and that I use myself, and most of the librarians that I know use, is Purdue OWL, their online writing lab. It's a really, really good resource, not just for examples on annotated bibliographies, but on the different citation formats. They've also added like a social media section, so they'll show you how to cite like a tweet or a Facebook post or an email or something like that. So I really, really urge all of my students in particular, and just students in general, to definitely refer to OWL. It's a really, really good resource. And they define an annotated bibliography as one that includes a summary, a purpose, and or an evaluation on each source. Like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about what how those differentiate between each other and why you need them, which is important. So first, we're just going to talk about the purpose of an annotated bibliography. Why would you create one unless the professor asks you to, basically? And I think it's a twofold reasoning as far as why you would create an annotated bib. So the first is just the citation. When you're creating your annotated bibliography, you want to create it as though it's going to go into your final research paper or your final project, right? Because the whole purpose of an annotated bib is to, number one, cite and cite correctly so that you can just drag and drop, copy and paste from your annotated bib into your research. And the other reason why you would create one is honestly just to keep things straight in your mind, right? If you're looking at 10 or 20 or 30 research articles, no matter how great your memory is, you're going to forget what an article is, even if you're reading the abstract, right? You're not going to get as much from it than you would if you actually wrote out the summary of the article, why you found it useful. Is it a popular article? Is it a scholarly article? That sort of thing. So just keeping straight the different multiple articles that you're reading so that they don't start to kind of bleed together, because it's really easy for articles, especially on the same topic, to just kind of bleed together. And then you have done all this work and you don't really have that much to show for it because you can't remember one article over the next. So that's the purpose. Yes. Is that it? Public participants, you can do lower on. Lower on. I can't imagine why I've never learned about this. I'm so sorry. It is. It is. It's absolutely how I made it through my thesis. My thesis was 60 or 70 pages. It was some ridiculous number of pages that I had to write, and I was reviewing about 30 different articles just at the beginning. And I can barely remember what I have for breakfast some mornings. I have a very terrible memory. So by creating an annotated bib just for me that had the citations that were correctly formatted and a pretty detailed description of the resources, whether they were books, whether they were articles, whether they were videos, whether it was an email that I got back from a researcher, whatever it was, just having all that in one place that I could refer to and be like, oh yeah, I remember that. It was really helpful. It was really helpful. And you can be as detailed or not as you want if it is just for you. If it's for a professor, obviously you need to follow those guidelines. But if you're using this for research and to kind of keep things straight, then get as detailed as you want. I got pretty detailed because, like I said, I have a pretty terrible memory, so it takes a little bit more to jog it. But I've had colleagues who wrote, 2 or 3 sentences about a a 30-page article and remembered everything and we're fine. Okay, so as far as the actual steps for creating an annotated bibliography, the first is, like I said, just the citation, right? Just making sure that it's formatted correctly, going back to OWL, going back to the APA manual or the MLA manual, depending on what you're more comfortable with and what your ultimate citation style is going to be for your research. Just making sure that everything is as it should be, that things that are supposed to have periods, things supposed to be italicized, that the citation looks how it should if you were to put it in your research right now. The next step is just the annotations, right? The summary, the purpose, and the evaluation, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the next slide. But just making sure that you have those in there and that they're descriptive enough for you so that you'll be able to remember, okay, this article was about this, and this is how I plan on using it. And it was a popular resource. You know, just making sure you have those notes that can jog your memory if it is just for you. Like I said, if it's for a professor, you need to follow those guidelines. But if this is for you, then, you know, you can go as detailed or as broad as you like. And then the final is just use full sentences, use proper grammar, just like you would in the main text of the paper, because I absolutely used some of the paragraphs in my annotated bibliography in that 60-page thesis. And that's one less paragraph that I had to rack my brain and try and come up with. You know, it's one less paragraph, it's one less sentence that I had to create just off the fly, right? I had already created it, it already looked nice, I already used, you know, proper grammar, my spelling was on point, and that was just one less thing I had to worry about when I was, you know, compiling my final thesis. So what are these three sections that I keep talking about with the annotations? Remember, the bibliography is the citation portion. The annotation portion is more for you as far as summary, evaluation, purpose. So let's just break these down a little bit. The summary section is just like what it sounds like. It's a summary of the work, right? What is it about? What topics are covered? What was the goal of the article, right? That's the summary. Next is the evaluation. And in my class, when I have my students to do an annotated bibliography, this is where I have them stop. The evaluation is just, was it useful? Was it reliable? Was it comparable? How did it compare with other authors or with other sources on the same topic? Was it a scholarly source? Was it not scholarly? Was it biased, right? Was there any sort of propaganda in it? Maybe there was a advertisement, you know, in the article. That means that it's, you know, probably not scholarly, it's definitely not peer-reviewed, right? So what's your honest assessment? What is it most appropriate for? Next is the purpose. So with the purpose section, what are you ultimately going to use this annotation for? How will it fit into the rest of your research? How are you going to use it for your final project? Like I said, in my class, I have my students stop at the evaluation section because they're not going to be using this for anything else, right? They're just using it for my class. But if you're making an annotated bibliography for yourself, then the ultimate goal is that you're going to use these resources, or their articles, books, you know, videos, or the like, in some way in your overall research. So how is this particular resource going to help you with your ultimate goal, right? What place is it going to fill? What's the purpose? Why are you using it? How is it important? Is it important, right, for your final project, or are you just using it to get more familiar with whatever that topic is? So summary, evaluation section, and purpose are the three different sections of the annotation. Usually it's a paragraph or so for each of these sections, and that sounds like a lot, but I promise it isn't, especially with some of these articles that are long, and especially with books, for example. You know, you may have to use 3 or 4 paragraphs, right? You may need a page-long summary section or a page-long purpose section. You just need to, be flexible and realize that this is to help you with your research. No one else, more than likely, is going to see it unless, like I said, it's for a class. So just make sure that you're as narrow or as broad in your descriptions as you need to be. Does everyone understand the different sections? Does anyone have any questions about that so far? Wonderful. All right, so let's keep it going. Okay, so I understand the evaluative paragraph can be a little tricky, right? Especially if this is your first research project, you're not very familiar with the library, you're not very familiar with the resources. Where do you turn as far as being able to correctly evaluate your resource? As far as if it's popular, if it's a scholarly resource, if it's peer-reviewed, how can you tell? The first is to ask your professor. That's usually the most direct way. Just, hi, Professor Baker, is this a appropriate resource for my research, right? Does this material, will this add or subtract from my overall goal of, research X, right? So just asking your professors where I start. Next is asking your librarian. All of our librarians have their masters in library science, including myself. Most of our librarians have masters in other subject areas. So we're more than happy to look over an article for you and say, this is more popular. Do you need popular? Or, this is scholarly. This would absolutely be appropriate. So it's not just, is this appropriate or is it not, but we can help you find other resources that are similar or not to what you've given us to look at. So definitely consult your local librarian for help on, evaluating the resource. And then the last is just this quick and dirty guide. It's, I'm not sure how old that guide is, but it was created by a few librarians here at Athens State, and it's basically just a checklist, right? If the article was written by a scholar, as far as the audience, then it will more than likely end up in the journal side. If the author was very biased, it's more than likely not as scholarly. It's, more than likely a popular article, or it may be a review of something which is not peer-reviewed, right? So it's just a real quick way to look at your resource, compare it to this quick and dirty guide and say, okay, I can say with a good bit of certainty that this is a good resource, or I can say that it's not, right? The quick and dirty guide is not a comprehensive guide, right? So using this and comparing your article to it, it's not to say 100%, okay, since it fills all these checks, then it's a magazine. Or since it fills all these checks, it's a journal and scholarly and appropriate, right? You kind of need to be able to look at the article, look at whatever the resource is, and absolutely compare them, but just keep in mind that this is not a comprehensive list. There are things off of this list that your resource may have that would lead it more into the magazine era, or, the opposite, into the journal. So definitely ask your professors, definitely ask your librarians, and if you're really in a pinch, definitely consult this quick and dirty guide. It's a really good guide. I use it for my students. Okay, so what about formatting? How should your annotated bibliography look? The first part of your annotation, or the first part of your annotated bibliography should be the bibliography. I know it sounds backwards. It's called an annotated bibliography, not a bibliography annotation. But the first part is the bibliography portion, which is the citation. Is it an APA, MLA, Chicago, Turabian? It needs to, of course, be correctly cited, correctly formatted. Underneath that is your summary. What is it? What is the resource about, right? What are we talking about? What does it cover? What are the topics? Next is your evaluation. Is it biased? Is there propaganda in it? Is it a scholarly resource or a non-scholarly resource? And then finally is the purpose paragraph, right? How are you going to use this? How is this going to fit with your overall research, with everything else that you compiled? How is this going to really, find its place in the rest of your paper? Or will it, right? So just making sure that you have these different sections. They don't need to be labeled unless you just need to label them. I don't have my students labeling mine because it's pretty clear which is which, right? It's pretty easy to tell this is a summary paragraph, this paragraph is evaluating something, this is the purpose paragraph, right? So if you model all of your citations and annotations after this model, then you won't have to be concerned about which paragraph is what, right? Because they'll all be in the same order. Remember, too, that some of these may be more than one paragraph, right? You may feel like you need to have a longer summary paragraph. Maybe you need 3 or 4 paragraphs. Maybe you need to have a longer purpose, a longer evaluation paragraph. So, like I said earlier, just make sure that you are flexible and you don't try and just limit yourself to one paragraph because, oh my goodness, Professor Baker said it's just supposed to be one paragraph. It could be more than one paragraph in any of these 3 sections. Okay, so again, I really, really want to stress that the online writing lab with Purdue OWL is a really good place to help you with citations and different examples of various annotated bibliographies. All sorts of things are in there. It's really just nice to kind of go in there and poke around, and they update it relatively regularly. So everything on there is current, it's in date, they're using the correct editions of MLA and APA to write these examples. So I use it often. Like I said, most of the librarians here use it. It's just a really, really good resource. And it's free on top of that. So you don't have to pay anything. Once this presentation concludes, I think it'll take a couple days for us to upload the PowerPoints, and then you can just click on the link and it'll take you right there. Or you can Google Online Writing Lab, Purdue Online Writing Lab, and it'll pop right up.
All right, so thanks so much for that overview, Ms. Baker. And I just want to go ahead and say thanks to those who joined us, and thanks for your questions. If you have further questions about this form, which you may be assigned by your professor or you may use for your own research, please go ahead and contact the librarians or the Writing Center. We can both address that. If it has to do with research, go ahead and contact the librarians. They're the ones that are going to help you the best with that. If it has to do with the writing portion, go ahead and contact the Writing Center, and we'll be glad to give you more information on this and give you feedback on any annotations that you might already have done. So thanks again for joining us. Have a great afternoon, and don't hesitate to contact us if you need more help. All right, bye.
Bye.